mean, that journey for me has been a really long one, and it's been such a foundational piece of my healing, and just that connection and that relationship to my own voice, because it was completely shut off, for a long time. Because I came from an abusive childhood, there were certain things that I was not able to talk about. I was not allowed to talk about it, and I just wasn't able to. I didn't know that I had a voice. I didn't know that I had boundaries. I didn't know that if I used my voice, it would even matter. I was so disconnected from that because my boundaries and my personhood had just been annihilated.
Welcome to the Sound of You podcast. This is a space where we have inspiring, thoughtful conversations about the voice, about healthy self-expression, and all things spirituality and personal growth. My name is Friederike. I am your host, and I am so excited that you're here. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the Sound of You podcast. And again, this is interview time. Today, the podcast could be called The Sound of Julia. I am honored to have Julia Phoenix here as my guest. She is a love and leadership coach, a relationship expert, and a transformational healer. And by the way, I can attest to all of that. So I can expose here that I was in one of your programs and I absolutely recommend it. I love it. It's amazing. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for that. I really appreciate it, Katie. Thank you.
So I want to start maybe with love and leadership coach. That's a little bit different than what you usually hear. I'm a love coach, I'm a relationship coach, I'm a leadership coach, but you kind of embody all of it. Can you maybe share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me to expound. And it's a specific type of human and a specific type of woman in particular that I enjoy working with most. And it is a woman who is a leader in her own right. And that could mean you're leading a family, you're just leading your own life. It could mean that you are leading a business or running a company. But it's actually a position of power that you are naturally inclined to step into, where you're taking a lot of ownership and responsibility for your choices and the life that you want to create. And I find that women often struggle with this in terms of, how do I step into this kind of a role in my soul purpose and in my life where I'm in this position of leadership and still maintain things that are important to me with regard to connection and relationships, with regard to my feminine energy and essence. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I love to play, because I truly believe that there is a way that we can move through the world and guide and lead our lives, ourselves, one another, our enterprises, with love as the foundation. And it's the way that I try to run my life. So, yeah, that's what I
love that. And it's so beautiful listening to you. You have this like amazing soothing energy for me right now, because I was like a little nervous and really excited. I'm like, I want to make this a really good interview.
I have been told by many that my voice can be soothing. So hopefully you don't fall asleep.
No. So, as you can hear, even I get nervous at times. I get to speak to really, really, really amazing people here on my podcast, and it's just such a joy. And as this conversation with Julia Phoenix continues, we will talk more in depth about relationships, and not just the relationships between people, but also some curious similarities between, for example, your relationships to people and your relationship to money, and how the patterns are actually very, very, very similar, if not the same. We will dive into how Julia found her voice in all of the different areas of her life, and how it came about that she recently started offering light language transmissions as well, and what that actually is. Right now, I want to make you aware that what you can get from me is a unique combination of voice activation coaching and trauma release. So this is for you, especially if you struggle with things like expressing your needs and wants and desires, standing in your truth, if getting in front of people and actually saying what you think scares the shit out of you, if you would like to have a little bit more solid, joyful, grounded energy in your life, that's when we really, really, really should talk. And that's what we can absolutely change. And if you want, you will also learn a little bit of singing. And now let's get back to the interview and enjoy the ride. I love that you speak about leadership and all these different aspects. So it's not just like leading a business, but for example, leading a family and all these in different areas of your life, you know. When we met, maybe as a little anecdote, that was 2016.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yes, it
a long
was.
time ago. And that was at Teal Swan's completion process training. You were there as a volunteer. And back then, I don't remember you already being or claiming or calling yourself a relationship coach. It was very much into very deep transformational inner child work, which you still do.
Yes.
Can you share with me, when did that relationship aspect come into the game?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because when I met you, I was probably 3 months into dating my current partner. So I was in a different time in my life with regard to working on my own relationship stuff and building my own foundation in partnership and really navigating through my own patterns and friendships and everything like that. But I think that what I started to notice with the work that I was doing, because I did coach, I actually began coaching in 2015, and I was doing, like you said, some pretty deep dive trauma work with pretty much everyone I was working with. And that was very much my focus. I didn't have a niche, you know, as they call it. I didn't have a lot of focus. It was like, if you're in pain and you need help emotionally, come to me. If your life is messed up, come to me. But what I found again and again was that the people who were coming to me most frequently, the pain that was being triggered in their lives in order to take them deeper into their own path of integration or healing or expansion, was almost always relationship. It was almost always, I'm in pain because of a relationship. I'm in pain because I don't have a relationship. Or, you know, it might be some other issue, but you can trace it back to relationships, most especially the ones with our earliest caregivers. And I recognized this passion that I had, particularly to help women with this, because I struggled so much in this arena. And I had so many other things going on and different addictions that really had a hold on me for many years. But the relationship addiction and the patterns that would come up for me inside of relationship were some of the hardest and some of the most difficult to sort of unpack and start to unravel. And so, you know, I felt really passionate about that, especially after I had gotten myself into a position where I was receiving a new kind of an experience in a relationship. And I thought, you know, a lot of women that I know, not only are they in pain inside of maybe a toxic relationship, for example, or maybe they're feeling lonely or insecure because of their lack of relationships, but it's also like, I think women just don't understand how good life can be when you have the right kind of support. And seeing so many people trying to do life by themselves and trying to navigate all these situations and heal by themselves, I just recognized this need to help people sort through their blocks and barriers to connection, to create meaningful relationships in their lives. And so that's where I chose to focus.
Yeah. Beautiful. A lot of men also, though, like I
Definitely.
recognized in my partner who was very much like, I can do life on my own. I'm not sure if I ever want a partner for long, you know. That there was a moment he was like, having a relationship is actually nice. Whereas, like,
Imagine that. Well, I
imagine
think
that.
so many people do associate it with an increase of stressors rather
Mm-hmm.
than a decrease of stressors. And it's true, can be if you don't have really wonderful relationship skills, if you have a lot of unprocessed trauma, if it's not the compatible situation for you or the right fit for you, it can be that way. But I don't believe it's meant to be that way, at least not indefinitely,
Yeah.
right? I truly believe that our relationships should nourish us, should
Yeah.
support us, should make our life sweeter, should make our life easier, should be a safe haven for us in this crazy world. And I totally agree. Men struggle so much as well and have so much of this programming
Yeah.
also. I've just chosen to work primarily with women because I relate to them more and they relate to me more in their
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed any patterns that keep coming up for your clients in relationships? And the other thing that I want to say that I've noticed about you and the things that you share on social media is that you really encourage people, or you give people hope that there is love and connection for them, even if they are not completely healed. What does that
Mm-hmm.
even mean? But like, you don't say, oh, manifest your dream partner, you only have to get rid of XYZ beliefs, but
Mm-hmm.
you're sharing, no, like, this is possible now. And I just heard you say, like, you navigated through some things during your relationship and you didn't have it maybe all figured out before. So that's something that I really love.
Absolutely.
And what are some of the, if you can say, some of the things that come up the most for the women you work with?
For the women I work with, I mean, it's a tough one because there's so many, but I would say in majority of women that I work with, a huge block is just codependency patterns in general
Mm-hmm.
and the tendency to lose ourselves inside of relationships and then get scared that if we get into another relationship, we're going to do that, or get into that relationship, lose ourselves, freak out, and then want to push away. So there's
Mm-hmm.
this patterning that leads us to believe, and this is, not just the beliefs like in the mind. This is biological, like somatic programming that is really ingrained for most of us, that we cannot be in a position of sovereignty and power in ownership of our own choices and our own energy, our own boundaries, and receive love, support, care, and affection, right, at the same time. So that's the biggest thing that I see. And sometimes people are more aware of one side of this sort of dichotomy than the other and are more resistant to one side than the other. So, for example, there might be a woman who is like, I do not want a relationship at all because every time I get into a relationship, I just, if somebody tries to control me or tells me what to do, or I just tend to lose myself. And I don't want to do that. So I don't want to date, or I don't want to be in a relationship. And then there might be someone else that is like, all I want is for someone to love me. All I want is to be in a relationship. That's all I want. But they're totally not seeing the side of them that prioritizes and values freedom and sovereignty and is going to push against that value of connection if it's seen as being a mutually exclusive thing. So that's essentially what I'm saying, is that I find so many women see this as being a mutually exclusive type of a paradigm where I can either have connection with myself and love for myself, or I can have connection with another
Yeah.
human being. And it's nuanced and it's challenging to
Mm-hmm.
begin to relate in a new way where you are actually holding boundaries and holding on to your sense of self and allowing yourself to be open to deeply care and connect and receive and include someone as a part of your life. I find most people, not even just women, most people really don't know how to do that at all. We don't have great examples, right? We're either overpowering or we feel overpowered, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of my work that I do with women is really about that. And for a lot of women, ironically, and this is often true even for those who are like, oh, I want is a relationship. I don't understand why I'm not getting the relationship. A lot of that work is actually about like, okay, well, what are we afraid of losing if we get into that relationship? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question well enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to add something when it comes to codependency. I find that it's got a lot to do with boundaries, of course, you know, like what you say about where do I need myself and stand for what I need and want to do or whatever. But I also found that because I was in that same dynamic, that then I struggled actually with also seeing the boundaries and the capacities of another person, so of my partner.
Yeah.
So I remember actually you saying to me last year as I was navigating a breakup, I think your partner is just not in a position of fulfilling your needs right now. And I still remember you saying this phrase because I didn't really fully understand it last year. Like I didn't want to understand it also, right? Because
relatable.
It's like, no, he doesn't want to, right? And there might have been truth to that also, but what I've really seen is the more that I hold my own boundaries, the more that I'm capable of seeing my partners and respecting them and acknowledging capacity.
Absolutely, yes. And acknowledging capacity in general. And that's such a beautiful way to put it, because we all are so different with regard to what we're genuinely available for. The tricky thing about this is that because so many people don't know this about themselves, they may not always communicate it, and they may say that they're available for things that they're not. And maybe they want to be able to do those things. You know, they want to be able to give you this and give you that and show up in this way and show up in that way. So what I've found to be so beneficial, and this doesn't have to be outside of a relationship. You can start doing this work inside of a relationship, but really two people with a solid sense of self that can communicate truthfully about those needs are what makes a healthy relationship. Because if we don't know ourselves deeply enough, you know, we can't assess that and we can't communicate that to others. And then expectations don't get met, resentments start to build, needs are not fulfilled, and that's where everything starts to kind of spiral and go to crap. But you're absolutely right. I think the more that we connect with ourselves in general, and the more that we know ourselves in general, the easier it is to kind of see other people and what's true for them and what they may or may not be available for. And they do show us with their actions. A lot of times we don't want to see it.
Yeah. I actually received a question beforehand, and I'm curious how you would answer to this person. Are you up for that? Okay.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. The question is how to behave in terms of asking too much of one person. I'm feeling shame about this because I do know better, but since the lack of a warmth of a mother figure in my life, it's been a recurring sentiment.
Yeah, I can feel a little bit of that shame just even in the statement of like, I should know better, you know? So the first thing I would say is please be gentle with yourself. I also come from a background where I've had quite a tremendous amount of difficulty in my relationship with my mother. And that is a deep, deep wound. And the impact of that reverberates out throughout all of our relationships, including our relationship with ourselves. And so I do want to just acknowledge and name like how deeply challenging that is. So there's a couple of things. One is looking at, are we really asking too much of someone, or are we asking the wrong person? Because as we were just saying, sometimes the person that we are wanting those resources to come from just doesn't have it or doesn't want to give it for whatever reason, which is valid and okay and their sovereign choice. So really looking at that, because and without talking to this person in more detail, I couldn't really understand, but you'd be probably surprised how many women have come to me just talking about really basic needs that they're wanting to have. Like, I just want a partner who asks me how I'm doing and comforts me and wants to kind of be there for me emotionally. But I feel like that's too much to ask. And he's always telling me that that's not okay. And I'm like, that's not an inappropriate ask. Like, it's not an inappropriate need to have from a partner. It's just that we may have been in a position where other people have responded in ways that have caused us to feel shame about that need, or told us that we shouldn't have that need, or whatever. And so we turn against ourselves and we make it about fixing ourselves out of the need. But it may just be that you need to accept the need and find the available resources to meet it. Now, some of these needs can come from inside of a partnership, and some of them actually, we're going to need multiple resources to meet the need. So this is also really important. And I find that, sometimes this has to do with developmental trauma and really just wanting like a parent. And if you are in that type of a position, I really suggest one-on-one work with someone. One-on-one work with a trauma-informed therapist or coach, or someone who can really help you with some of those childhood wounds and help you repattern your nervous system, actually, so that need for mom isn't completely, overarching every relationship that you have. And then on the other end of that too, finding out resources outside of the relationship. So, I feel like we put so much strain, especially in Western cultures, on our primary partnerships, because we're kind of given the message. We're shown the love story, on TV and movies and whatever, but it's a single family household kind of a model. And it's not very community oriented. I didn't grow up around extended family at all. Just looking at that through a cultural lens. So we decide that our partner is going to be the one that meets all those needs for us. And it doesn't work that way. We need multiple resources. And so it will often involve just getting out of our comfort zone to develop relationships with multiple people. For example, if you're a woman in a relationship with a man, you need female friends. Like, there's just no way of getting around that. Just a simple example, but I hope that answers the question and is helpful. Again, without kind of knowing more of the context, it's tough to give a really targeted response.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also I can share from my side that I had fears of, but if I go more after what I like and I don't practice his hobbies so much anymore, then maybe the relationship is not going to work and it's all going to go to shit. And the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Because eventually, you will be more fulfilled and more nourished.
Yes.
And the relationship can only benefit from that.
100%. Yeah, that's what I've found. Yeah. My partner and I have pretty different interests in a lot of regards. And I need people that I can just like talk spirituality and relate to really deeply emotionally, and talk about like psychology and astrology and personality typing systems and all this different stuff. And it's not that he doesn't ever like to do that, but it's like he wants to be in his workshop building. If I gave up those things that I was interested in and I didn't have these other friendships and I was in the workshop with him all day long, I'd be miserable.
Yeah.
We'd probably be at each other's throats.
And also, if you were expecting him to fulfill those needs when he's just not there,
Yeah, that's not what he wants to do. And that's part of what love is to me, is like, it's honoring a being for who they innately are and honoring how they want to spend their time and energy. I want to support that. I want to honor that. And if that is something that really doesn't align with how I want to spend my time and energy, I've got a couple different choices. I can continue to spend my time and energy doing whatever I want over here and see where we can meet, where there is overlap, compatibility, etc. Or I can choose a different situation for myself, but I'm not going to sit here and try to force someone to change. That's also another big pattern I see with women, by the way, in my work. It's a lot about why isn't he, it's so much fear of like, if he doesn't change this, if he doesn't change this pattern, if he can't meet me here or whatever, like I'm going to lose the relationship. And so there's a lot of anxiety and it comes through as like nagging or trying to teach or trying to push things on people. And it inevitably backfires, as I'm sure you all know.
Yeah. I wanted to also talk a little bit about relationships in other areas of life, because I know you also have masterminds, well, around leadership and around money.
Yes.
And I love that, we have relationships with everything in life, but I'll let you expand on it and
Absolutely.
maybe, share some of the patterns and similarities that you see.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I really feel and believe and think that mastering our relationships is like a cheat code to mastering life itself. And you can apply whatever you're finding about relationships and about the ways that you engage with them to a relationship in any area. And we are in relationship all day long with everything around us. This is a relational world that we live in. We're not in oneness on this 3D plane. We're in relationship, right? We're separate beings or separate entities that have organized themselves into matter, and they have identities. And this is a very feminine principle as well, the principle of relating. And so I've found that most especially women will resonate with this method. But understanding that all day long, I'm in a relationship right now, not only with you, but with technology. I'm in a relationship with, time, right at this very moment, a relationship with my voice, a relationship with my body. We have relationships to food, to sexuality, to money. That's a big one that I love to work with people around. And, to our business itself, if we have a business, to our career. So really the applications I find are endless.
Yeah. What if someone doesn't really get what you're talking about, saying like we're in a relationship with this and that? What makes a relationship a relationship? Like say your relationship to your business or to money.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would say a relationship is 2 points of perspective that impact each other. So, it's basically anything that you impact or that impacts you, you're in a relationship with. And there is an exchange on some level of some kind of energy.
So emotions, thoughts.
Emotions, thoughts, actions, or behaviors, all of that. Yeah, all of that.
Is there something that you found in your own patterns, in your own relationship patterns, that where you saw, oh my God, I used to do this in my partnership. I'm doing this with money as well. Why am I doing this? Or, something like that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of different areas. Like, I think I've made more progress in some than others, but just to speak to the money bit, definitely I have tended more towards anxiety in my relationships. And if anyone is familiar with attachment styles, more towards that anxious style of relating, particularly in my relationships with men, somewhat disorganized, but leaning towards anxious. And, there was a lot of fear and control. And this manifested a lot as clinging or manipulation, really not wanting to let go of any sense of control that I had around a relationship or around a person, trying to navigate it, and so that I'm seen in a certain way, so that I get the responses that I need, so that the person stays and takes care of me, right? So with money, I'm more of what you would call like a hoarding type of pattern,
Oh,
or I
interesting.
was in the
Uh-huh.
past. So some people have more of the pattern where it's like, I got to spend something immediately once I get it. It's not even like it burns a hole in my pocket kind of thing. I have been the opposite. It's been like, sometimes I went through more disorganized modes where it's like, I don't even want to look at it. I don't want to look at my bank balance. I don't want to check it. But a lot of the times it was me just clinging to
Mhm.
resources, not trusting at all that it was going to be there. Fear that if I spent money, if I released it, I wouldn't be able to receive more. So it was like a scarcity of resources. And I realized that I had the same type of idea about love, in the
Yeah.
past. So it had just kind of moved over to this other place. And there was also ideas and beliefs that I had around needing to fix myself or perform in order to be worthy of receiving money. And that was the same way that I had related to love inside of relationships, and
Mm.
receiving resources, receiving support, receiving relational nourishment. It was like, well, if I'm really good and if I'm perfect, or if I hold myself a certain way, if I do things just right, if I'm good enough, then I'll get the love I need. And, I think that some people will, especially, you see in the coaching world or in the spiritual world, like people will apply this to money, and it's really easy to do. There's a lot of voices out there saying, like, you just have to fix your money mindset and be in this high vibration all the time, and then you'll receive. And then you're thinking, well, why can't I do that? I'm not good enough. I'm not perfect enough. I have to work harder. I have to do more
Yeah.
to try to get to this place where I'm worthy of having money. And, you know, so that can be a tricky place where it shows up.
Yeah, totally. It's so fascinating. Like I found in myself that I thought for a while that I had an anxious attachment style, but I figured after a while that that's actually a learned pattern that I thought, oh, this is the way women are supposed to be. And
Ah.
but actually underneath, I was more of the avoidant style. And I could see that in my
Mm.
money patterns where it's like, I'm not gonna look at it. Like, what's gonna come up if I look at it? Like, I don't know, I'd rather look away.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's like
Totally.
once you see that, it's like, oh my goodness. But it's amazing once you see that you have the empowerment to potentially do something about it. Um,
Absolutely.
Recently, you started sharing something different about yourself and about your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And that is being also a channel for light codes, light
Yeah.
language. And I have spoken about channeling on this podcast before, I think, but I've never mentioned light language. What do you
Mm.
understand under this term?
I'm a channel for many things, I would say, but light
Mhm.
language specifically, I like to think about it as a language that our soul understands rather than our mind. They are sacred syllables, sacred sounds that do sound like another language
Yeah.
they have the power to, sound moves energy, as you know, right? And they have the power to bypass actually the conscious mind and go in energetically and activate things like your remembrance of certain codes, or it has the power as well to clear things, to move energy
Yeah.
essentially, and to activate us on a really deep level, to heal us on a really deep level. So there are different forms. I find there are so many different, you could say, dialects in addition to the languages. So for example, like, a language might come from a starseed race like the Pleiades, but there are different dialects that are
Mhm.
associated with the Pleiades. And also, it's rare that you won't find it mixed in with something else, because a lot of us are mutts. So for a lot of us, it's like this very unique expression of the soul and the beings that we are connected to that are, in many cases kind of braided with our consciousness, and just channeling that energy from those higher dimensional consciousness streams into our physical body and delivering from that place. It's very joyful and it's very powerful.
Yeah. I sometimes refer to it as, it sounds like gibberish. Like it just sounds
does.
like, but it's exactly, what you said, like you can't mentally understand.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people struggle with this because when they first start opening up to it or when they're receiving it, because it's not like you can go online and Google what it means.
Yeah.
You can't go
There's
online and be
no
like,
translator.
what is a manaha? Like what is, and it's just not going to give you anything. So it's really about, are you willing to feel the frequencies and just trust that? So it can be tough if you're a really logical type of person, and you really have this need to kind of understand the mechanics of things to really get behind it. And it's not for everybody, but I have found it to be really, really powerful.
Yeah. You shared something the other day that I related to very deeply, where you said you've gone back and forth with this gift of yours, from first discovering that you are able to open up to these transmissions to now finally actually offering it, sharing it more with the world. What was this process? And maybe also, since we also found similarities in relationships, what is this process of finding your voice and your expression in all of these areas?
Oh, I love this. So, that journey for me has been a really long one, and it's been such a foundational piece of my healing, and just that connection and that relationship to my own voice, because it was completely shut off, for a long time, because I came from an abusive childhood. There were certain things that I was not able to talk about. I was not allowed to talk about it. And I just wasn't able to. I didn't know that I had a voice. I didn't know that I had boundaries. I didn't know that if I used my voice, it would even matter. I was so disconnected from that because my boundaries and my personhood had just been annihilated again and again and again in all these really extreme ways. Growing up with a father who was a pedophile and growing up in this creepy cult that my family was a part of. It was really like I was wearing a chain around my neck, for the majority of my life was what it felt like. And I had no access. So what really started to open up that access in the beginning was my recovery process from eating disorders, especially bulimia. Although I did have, other eating disorders and I had drug addiction as well. But my recovery process from bulimia was about connecting deeply with the part of me who was trying to express through that action. Because if you think about it, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit disturbing to some of your listeners, I hope it's okay, but
no, we have no, well,
I got to use my
boundaries.
voice, you guys.
It's not true, but there's no taboos here.
Okay. Yeah. Well, telling the story I find is, an important part of my healing even still. And, hopefully someone will resonate, but it was really this almost like a violent recreation of the stuffing and then the expression of so much. It was trying to get something out that I didn't know how to get out any other way. It was like trying to come out like through my cells because I couldn't connect to my own voice or my own power at all. So a lot of it, when I went into it, it was in treatment, eating disorder treatment. I was in there for quite a while. And I remember, admitting for the first time that I was angry and feeling a connection to my voice then, that, being able to say for the first time that I didn't like something. Like these were things that I was not able to do at all, and I actually ended up writing my master's thesis a few years later on the development of interpersonal boundaries and symptom reduction amongst adult women with bulimia, because there is research on this, it is correlated, right? So Anyway, that's been a huge, long process, just connecting to my voice to the degree that I can show up in the world and show up in my relationships and speak honestly and openly and in integrity from my heart, share my boundaries, all of that. This was a different level. I mentioned that I grew up in this cult, and so I have had a huge aversion to spiritual bypassing over the years and to a lot of new agey type of stuff, even though I've always been deeply, deeply psychic.
Yeah.
So it's like I've got this like crystal aura and I'm like super sensitive and psychic, but I'm like, no, only grounding into the physical, that's the only thing that's safe, and it's the somatic healing and it's the relationships. And I am so grateful that I went down that path first, because I think it can be actually quite damaging sometimes when we go straight to the higher realms and we don't integrate the body, we don't integrate our trauma, we don't integrate our relationships and our very human life. But through this work, it's really about the relationship that I began to develop with my own soul. Understanding that I am not everything that I've believed that I am. I am not what happened to me. I am not the result of what happened to me that I still carry on a given day. I'm actually not all of that. I am this divine light of source. It was connecting to my own spiritual channel that came as a result of this. And naturally, this channel wanted to open and things started to want to come through. And this was several years ago. I moved out to this little town called Bandon in Oregon by the ocean. And it's this beautiful beach. There are these giant rock formations, and it's a Lemurian portal, actually. So I have Lemurian ancestry, as well as dominantly Pleiadian consciousnesses that I'm connected to. But it activated something in me, and I would just be walking along the beach, and I actually started to feel quite overwhelmed. I remember one day specifically, I was like buzzing and I was kind of shaking, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like I was like, do I need to scream? Do I need to run? Like what needs? And I just opened my mouth and these weird noises started coming out, and it just started coming out and it started coming out, and it wouldn't stop. And so I actually recorded some of what was happening, and I shared it with my dear friend Allison Reed, who also does sound healing. I don't know if you know her.
Yeah.
She's a dear, dear friend. And I knew that she does light language, and it sounded kind of similar. And so I was like, what is this? And she was like, oh yeah, that's light language. Like you're just opening your light language. And I was like, it's so weird. So then I started doing it like for myself, and I kept it behind closed doors for a really long time. I kept it just in my own practice. And sometimes I could feel, I'd be in a session with someone and I'd want to sing, and it would be these sounds that wanted to come through, and I would actually just hold it back. I thought, I was so nervous, like, are they going to think it's weird? Maybe it's only me that feels like this is, healing and cool. Maybe everybody else is just experiencing it like gibberish, or like maybe people will think I'm crazy. Maybe people will think I'm a spiritual bypasser, and I don't want to be seen that way. Maybe people will think that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm some kind of charlatan. So it was all of that. And I would say it took me a couple of years before I really ended up offering it. And I did it in baby steps first, which is always kind of what I recommend when we're starting to share something that we're really scared to bring forward, right? Yeah. It's like, I started inside of a private group container and just did a little short thing at the end of a meditation. And then the response was so positive, it was encouraging, right? Yeah. So then I started doing it a little bit more inside of these group containers and then in private sessions. And then I started offering readings where I'm also talking to spirit guides and sharing information. And then we're dissolving cords and we're doing all kinds of work where there's these weird sounds coming through me and everything. But again, it's like the feedback that I've gotten, the mirroring that I've gotten has helped so much in terms of strengthening this confidence and this awareness that like, actually, this is something that helps people. So why would I keep this back? Why would I hold this back for myself? And it feels so good because it is such an authentic aspect of my soul. And this is the thing that I've learned about our voice, is that it is really meant to be a channel in a lot of ways because we're so versatile. It's a channel for an emotion or a particular personality or wisdom or whatever. And this is just as much a part of my being as a part of my being that wants to express to my partner that something that he said hurt me. And so it's just as important for me to bring it forward and have it be witnessed, because that's when the healing happens.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing it. I'm actually so curious what's going to happen with me after this interview, because like funny things happen. For example, I had a guest here talk about self-pleasure and sex and tantra, and lo and behold, the week after I had this interview, I had like one of the best sexual experiences of my life. And so I know these interviews also activate something in me, and literally the whole time we're speaking, my body is buzzing. I'm just like breathing through it. I'm like, what's going on? I want to move like the whole time.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
I did not eat too much sugar today. I'm on a cleanse. So that's not the thing.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I actually feel surprised that you haven't opened to light language yet, actually, because of the connection with sound. Oh, you have? Okay.
I have. It's just, for me, the journey is actually, it's still a quote unquote process.
Sure.
I discovered it, I think, in 2018. So it's been quite a while. The way that it was for me is that I noticed when I was meditating at a certain point, I just wanted to sing, but it wasn't any like particular melody, no particular like words, as we know them. And someone was then telling me that basically this is light language, or I think I've kind of figured that it was light language by watching some YouTube videos that I had seen where people speak light language, but I had never heard anyone sing it. But I was like, that's actually what's happening. And I had the same things happening with me in sessions where I was like, I want to sing for you. Like, is it okay if I do that? And I noticed like every time I did that and I would follow this impulse, this session, like it kind of sped up the whole process for that person. And what I find myself doing sometimes, where I feel like this doesn't need to come through my actual physical voice right now, I'm like singing inside of me for a person. So it goes to, if you want, goes into another realm where we both hear the sounds. What happened with me is that the feedback, same thing, was so overwhelmingly positive that I was like, I need to go out with this. And people were telling me like, yeah, you can make a lot of money, and I was like starting to market it. And something about that was just so off that I felt it shutting down. So it wasn't like it left, but it wasn't really fully there and authentic anymore. And at the moment, I'm in this place where I trust that in the moments where I feel inclined to do this kind of singing and channeling, then it will be exactly right. But it's not something that I offer on like a regular basis. It might, I might, but yeah.
So. Well, I'd love to hear your beautiful, I was under the impression for some reason like that it was mostly just like sound channeling, but not necessarily like light language words. But I mean, I'm not surprised at all. And I also wouldn't be surprised if you start, more, but I think it's really different too, like how it comes through for different people. Some people don't do the singing part at all. I love to sing and speak it. And of course it can sound quite differently. It can feel quite differently. And it's such a personal thing. I definitely also don't think that everybody who has that gift needs to offer it publicly or needs to offer it as its own individual service or anything like that. It can be incorporated into whatever it is we're doing, like you said. I love what you said about how it tends to accelerate the process, I've found that using it alongside other tools like is a really helpful. So, you can use it with energy work, you can use it with emotional healing work, you can cast spells with it over your potions that you're cooking or whatever.
Ooh, I never thought of that before.
Limitless. Yeah, you can do it with your water. You can like speak light language into your water and charge it with a certain frequency. It's just a fun thing to play with.
Yeah. I love also that you mentioned the power of the voice, because I totally feel like what I keep saying is the voice is a mirror of the soul.
Yes.
You will hear how a person is doing just by the way that they speak. Most of us will.
Yes.
And so much about the way that we communicate and use our voice. And I feel like you are such a powerful voice of love that I'm so grateful to know.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Makes me feel good. I definitely try to speak love into the world, and that can look and sound differently at different times, but it's true. I fully believe in the power of the voice as well. Like very, very much. It's been one of the most powerful forces in my life, and I believe in the work that you're doing, because I think that when people can tap into their own voice and they recognize that healing power within themselves, like it has monumental ripple effects. I mean, it can change someone's life to an intense degree, like completely 180. So I think it's so important to keep getting that message out the way that you're offering to people.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything that I have not asked or that is coming through for you right now that you want to share with people to end this with?
I think the only thing that is for some reason coming to me that I want to share, maybe it's because we're kind of in like a Scorpio season. So we tend to want to be a little bit more private during that time. And I think that's beautiful. Like there's so much beauty in that. And there's a time and a place for solitude and just going within. But we just really need each other. And, that's kind of like, I just have this voice inside that's like, it is time for people to come together. And I don't want to say it like that and be kind of like intense and political about it or anything like that. But the truth is like, we need each other right now. Like this is the time, if there was any, where everybody's going through it on some level, especially within the last couple of years, right? And if we're trying to navigate life alone, if we're trying to find the solutions alone, if we're trying to feel better alone, if we're trying to make our lives work, but we're doing it alone and it's not working, like, and even if we are doing great, just considering that we need each other. So just asking the listeners, where can you invite more connection and support in your life, and just, seeing what comes up and go from there. That's all.
Thank you. So beautiful. Thank you for being on this podcast. If anyone wants to know more about Julia or has questions for her or me, I will put all of your contacts in the show notes to this episode. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. Big blessings, and always keep singing.
Thank you so much.
You just listened to the Sound of You podcast. And if you want to free your self-expression, be confident in who you are, and release old junk that really doesn't serve you anymore, get in touch with me and join the tribe. Bless this world with the sound of you.